The FBI already does this. The State Department already does this. So the State Department identifies already foreign disinformation that's coming into us. The FBI is already looking for disinformation that could lead to terrorism, harm, all these kind of things. We're trying to figure out this DHS new invention. This is not going to shock you on this. The leader that you appointed to be able to put into this task, when we just do a simple question to say, who is this person on it, what we get back is political statements that she's made, for instance, on the Steele dossier, which we all know was disinformation. That was a Clinton campaign document that was very engaged with the Russians on it. She's going to Chris Steele and saying, I listened to this last night. Chris Steele, yes, that Chris Steele provides some great historical context about the evolution of disinformation, worth a listen. Or when people made a comment publicly about Chris Steele, she responded back on Twitter, you're aware that the Steele dossier is a Republican opposition research project. Okay, that's clearly disinformation on this. She's also made the public statements, October the 14th, let me switch this over, October the 14th, 2020, in an AP article, she's quoted saying the Hunter Biden laptop, we view it as a Trump campaign product, and then said the emails don't need to be altered to be part of an influence campaign. Voters deserve the context, not a fairy tale about a laptop repair shop. We have a practical question here. We don't have a definition of what it is. We don't have boundaries of what it does. The FBI already does this. The State Department already does this. And the person you tap to lead the disinformation campaign has been outspoken on TikTok and Twitter with disinformation, specifically on election issues. So we're responding to something that's unknown, and what we do know is disinformation coming from it. Why should we not have suspicions on this?
Can I, I'll say two things. Number one, Senator, you mentioned that the Department of State and the Federal Bureau of Investigation already do this work. So does the Department of Homeland Security. The Department of Homeland Security has been doing this work for years in addressing disinformation that poses a threat to the security of our homeland. You are correct, Senator, that the rollout with respect to this working group was suboptimal, and we need to provide more information not only to this committee in Congress, but to the American public.
President Biden's Disinformation Governance Board, or as many of us are calling it, the Ministry of Truth, that was recently announced. You said in 2019, quote, the point of defending free speech is not that you expect everyone to be perfectly aligned with every speech act that is protected. Simple question, do you still believe that?
Of course.
That freedom of speech should not be subject to censorship by the government?
Sure.
Why is the Biden administration then putting someone who is an obvious partisan, someone who is engaged in the repeated pushing of misinformation, putting them in charge of a board ostensibly directed at regulating the free speech of American citizens?
That the use of misinformation...
Okay, with respect, we got limited time. So should the government be censoring and regulating the speech of American citizens, yes or no?
So that's a complex philosophical question. Obviously, we believe in free speech, but as you know, you don't have the right to yell fire in a crowded theater. If you regard that as the government regulating speech, then I suppose you would have to agree the answer.
Should the government silence voices that are politically inconvenient and that it disagrees with?
As a matter of course, in our domestic politics, of course not.
So why is the Biden administration creating a board to do that?
I believe this is based on the awareness that misinformation and disinformation is used as a weapon against the American
people. So was
people.
the Hunter Biden laptop misinformation?
I'm not familiar with all of the details of those stories. What I know is that Russia, notably, and other players too.
Except it wasn't Russia. It's an accurate laptop. Now the New York Times has acknowledged that after the election, and yet the head of this disinformation board happily pushed out that it was disinformation. That is a code word for things that are politically inconvenient.
Last year in our budget hearing, which was in July last year, I asked you some different questions for the record. Your team actually sent me the answers for those questions for the record 3 hours ago. So I'm going to give you a couple things because it may take 8 months to be able to get the answer back on it. And by the way, some of those were yes or no questions on it as well.
With respect to responses to requests for the record, we need to be swifter in providing this committee with responses, and I extend that apology to the entire committee.
But we can't get behind the data. So I'm asking you right now, will you commit to providing to this committee within 30 days all the raw data behind this report, at least to the extent that was provided in 2020, so we can compare apples to apples with previous reports.
Ranking Member Capito, most certainly, and I'm very disappointed to hear that you feel that you haven't received the data that we are obligated to provide to you in this committee. I certainly have some of it at my fingertips if you'd like to.
I think it's more of a case of reconfiguring how the data is presented so we can't have an accurate view of where these numbers and how they compare to 2020.
You testified last week about operational control of the southern border, and you testified that we do have operational control of the southern border. What we didn't get was your definition. Obviously, we look at this and say 221,000 people were encountered just in March illegally crossing the border. Another 66,000 people were seen crossing the border that the Border Patrol couldn't actually get to because they were taking care of the 221,000 people they did have. But you stated in your testimony, we do have operational control of the southern border. Can we get a copy of what your department uses as the definition of operational control?
Well, actually, there's a statutory definition, which is that operational control is if no individual and no controlled substance passes through our border. So under that strict definition, this country has never had operational control. And looking at that definition through the lens of reasonableness, we dedicate now 23,000 personnel to the border. We are surging increased personnel, facilities, and other methods of support. And in my opinion, operational controls means maximizing the resources we have to deliver the most effective results.
I would just say over 250,000 people that cross the border illegally in 1 month is not operational control. We're going to disagree on that pretty strongly.